genetically one breed mice. And he said, I have 100 mice who have been eating my development, my discovery, and I have another 100 who didn't get it. And you know, the 100 which we injected with carcinogens, 80% didn't get cancer. The other one, 80% got cancer. I said, that's very interesting. Yeah, you said, you know, but the trouble is, I'm going to retire very soon, like me. And I have no more funding. And I think one can even patent it. I'd love to develop it. But how? So I got his papers, sent them to a friend, a professor in Germany, sent them to my patent lawyers in Germany. And they said, yeah, sounds good, but long way to go. So anyway, we got together, and in '88 we decided to found a little company. In '99 we had Immunotech Research Corporation, and I put Dr. Bonus in my office in Montreal, gave him a secretary, and thought, well, give him a little funding and it will work. Yeah. Not so easy. So Gustavo, Baruchel, I started to negotiate with various kind of companies and said we have to market it ourselves. We can't license it. It's too good. It's a dream of my life. I'm convinced. Since I take it, which is since '93, I'm getting younger every year. Well, I'm 66 over, so I have all my wrinkles because the cosmetic is still missing, but I'm okay. So anyway, we sat down. We approached marketing companies here. We talked with distributors like, you know, Swiss and Jameson and so on. They all scratched their head and said, dairy product, we can't say what it can do. It's expensive to produce. We have to sell it at a certain price. Okay, finally I got one almost ready, signable, ready contract to cooperate with one company in Ontario, and came Alex. And I discussed with Alex the question. I said, yeah, no, Alex, it's a legal problem too, and we really still can't say what it can do, but what do you think? And he said, I said, I know somebody. I know a company who is just a startup company in multi-level marketing. You should look at multi-level marketing. So I remembered that the contact in my big pharmaceutical company said, Dieter, don't go to the pharmaceutical, look at multi-level marketing. And I've been doing business all my life, but I only knew multi-level marketing exists somewhere selling perfume. So it didn't mean anything for me. So I looked into a few companies. I went to Nu Skin also. I said, they sell 500 products. They sell sex stimulants and creams and perfumes, and don't think it works. And then Alex convinced me, so I met Chuck. I said, looked at him and said, well, there is another doer. So 2 doers together, well, may work. And we got together, we got to know each other. I said, well, I have the genius here. I have a doer here. Maybe I can retire.
Dieter,
so,
could I chime in and tell them how I came to meet you?
well, please.
Because that to me was really the hand of God, as our friend pointed out. I was having dinner on St. Lawrence Street in Montreal with a very good friend of mine who was a notary. We were there with our wives, and I asked him about another mutual friend who I knew had cancer of the ovaries. And I asked my friend, how is this other friend doing? And he said, she's doing very, very well. I said, what do you mean she's doing very well? I thought she was really had problems. He said, well, she's taking this product Immunical. And I asked him, what about Immunical? He said, well, it's a friend of his, a client of his by the name of Dieter Beer, who has financed some scientists at the Montreal General Hospital. And they were producing this product in just enough quantities to test it and to give her some of it. And she was doing remarkably well. I said, well, why isn't this product marketed? He said, well, they've tried every which way to market the product through drug companies, and it just wouldn't work. And we got off to another subject. And about 3 weeks later, it was about 4 o'clock in the morning when I do most of my serious thinking. And I remembered my dear friend Chuck Roberts. Chuck and I go back about 30 years, although you can all notice that I'm considerably younger than Chuck. But we were good friends. Not only was I Chuck's lawyer, but Chuck and I have been dear friends. And Chuck had started a small multi-level marketing company, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. If I could get Chuck together with Dieter Beer, and Dieter Beer's product is as good as my friend told me it was, then maybe we have a winner. I called my friend first thing in the morning, and he told me, well, Dieter is a very, first of all, he lives in Ontario. That was strike one. But Dieter is very, very particular about this. Anyway, I told him, that they would be treated with the utmost respect. And it took about 2 weeks to convince Dieter to meet with me. And I told him about Chuck and the idea. And frankly, the rest is history. I now turn it over to Chuck.
Well, a little serendipity and timing is everything, because timing, I guess if Dieter hadn't come along and Gus, well, first of all, Gus hadn't come along, we wouldn't have the product. If Dieter hadn't met Gus through all sorts of, little trials and things that happen in life, we wouldn't have been here. If Alex hadn't called me that day, am I still on here? That day, I wouldn't have gone down to meet Dieter. Now, Dieter was retired, Gus is retired, I was retired. And I wasn't going back to work, really. I had a little thing going here, and we did have a small company starting just to keep, you have to stay busy. I must work. I can't retire, but the idea wasn't to work quite this hard. And so when Dieter and I got together, we had a great time at the lawyer's office for a few months. I mean, that was really something. But we did get the thing together, and we did open the doors. It took us 8 or 9 months to get it together. When I first saw the product from Dieter, the first canister he gave me, and I'm not a big reader. A lot of you know me, and I really don't sit down and read technical stuff. But I do understand this product because I've listened to Dr. Bonus and John Molson, who's probably the biggest technician outside a doctor we have, and everybody about the product for years. So I understand it very well. Now, once I understood and read about the product at Alex's office and had the product, which had a lot of fat in it at the time, and it didn't have any shelf life. I mean, we may have had a shelf life for maybe 2 months if we were lucky at the time, and we were still considering doing it. It was probably going to have to be a couple $100 a box because it was really expensive in the first, you were around $1,500 or $1,600 a kilo at the time, and we still thought we had to market this to the market because of the strength of the product. And it took us during, I think, our negotiations and over that period of time before we opened the door, and it was about 8 or 9 months before we got the door open for the product, we got the product to where it sort of is today. And it's been improved, by the way, quite a bit since we started that product, the product you get today. And we finally got it to the market. Now, here's you've got 3 retired guys, but at least 3 of us work here. We've got 4 if you go to Alex, and he's retired. He came out of it. John's not quite retired yet because he's still a kid. Look at all the retirees up here, okay? Retired. We all want to retire, but we can't retire because of what we've got here. And if you look at the connection, I mean, you've got a Molson and you've got a Beer. I mean, a Roberts and Konigsberg have nothing to do with this at all. So, the story is great. We are missing some of the little points in the story, but generally, this is all timing, and it was timing by mistake and luck that we got to where we are today.
What you all should know is that my partner over here changed my life 4 years ago. And I remember it almost to the day we were walking back from his office, referring to Chuck. And he said to me, okay, one of us is going to have to learn the science. So, I mean, I threw myself into it, and I completely dedicated myself the last 4 years, 7 days a week. And, you know, I feel so privileged to have a professor like Dr. Bunos as my personal assistant that I could call upon, much to his demise sometimes at too early in the morning. And he got mad at me, but then he forgave me when it was 8 o'clock and he had his breakfast. But he's had the patience of Job with me. I remember getting the scientific articles, bringing them back to my office, and it took me an hour to go through an abstract. I had the Dorland Medical Dictionary on one side, and then a whole book on amino acids and milk science on the other side. And it's such a rewarding feeling to be part of an organization, to have a job where, number one, you can learn something, and number two, you get to speak to distributors every day and have positive feedback from distributors. So, you know, I really I thank Chuck for starting the company, and I can't tell you how great it is to be able to work with people like this and work with people like you. Thank you.
It would not be fitting of my billing as a lawyer if I didn't have the last word. But I'd like to tell you the day that I really became committed to the product. I wasn't. This was after the deal had been signed, shortly after the deal had been signed with Dieter and Chuck. And Chuck had really come out of retirement and went to work for the first time in his life. I was fortunate enough.
This is from a lawyer that loses his car in a parking lot.
It's not something we need to discuss today, Chuck. But I was fortunate enough that my daughter gave birth to my first granddaughter, and I was at the Mount Sinai Hospital just across the street in Toronto. And I remember both Dieter and Gus telling me about Dr. Baruchel and the work that he had done, and the work he had done previously at the Pasteur Institute in Paris. And I remember that Dr. Baruchel was now, I think, the head of immunological research at the hospital and a professor of medicine at the University of Toronto. And I went up to see him, and I introduced myself to him and told him that I was partly instrumental in getting these two gentlemen together. And he looked at me, and I will never forget that incident. He looked at me and he says, "Alex, do you understand what you have in your hands?" I said, "Dr. Baruchel, I am not sure what you mean." He says, "Do you understand what Immunocal can do?" And I said, "Again, Dr. Baruchel, I am not sure what you mean." He said, "Well, this product is capable of changing the way that medicine is practiced around the world."